the New Year's journey, relentless progress forward and protecting our peace. That sounds like a great plan.
We recognize genius wherever it exists. And if you're known by the company you keep, we are proud to not only spotlight the women that are part of Rockefeller Capital Management's unique network, but also welcome our brilliant audience members.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Esposito, and welcome back to Genius Loves Company.
And I'm Kristen Sario. As 2025 comes to a close, Laura and I will talk through the last 8 episodes of Genius Loves Company to reminisce on some of our favorite moments and incredible pieces of wisdom from the conversations we have had with extraordinary women in the Rockefeller network.
So let's start by diving into some of our favorite quotes from this year's episodes and sharing the stories behind each of our memorable conversations.
The first quote we will be highlighting is from Laura's conversation with Sam Cooper, Managing Director and Head of Distribution at Rockefeller Capital Management.
We're building a business. We are constantly thinking outside the box to provide unique investment structures for our clients, right? We are constantly working to create opportunities, and I think that builds confidence in itself.
It's so much fun to go back to these conversations. I love hearing kind of these quotes and tidbits from our colleagues and friends. But the conversation with Sam was one of my favorites, and her story is extraordinary. What advice would you give to someone who wants to embrace like that same level of creativity and confidence in their own career?
I loved that conversation with Sam because I've long admired Sam and her confidence. She just walks into a room and just owns it, but in a very unique and authentic way. The answer that she gave here, part of the question and the context was trying to kind of pick at, where does that confidence come from? How do I bottle up that confidence? How do our listeners and the audience convey that same amount of confidence? To me, she seems to exude day in and day out. And what people didn't hear from the pull quote was that before, she talked about how she just loves what she does. And she derives a lot of excitement and constant energy from that. So this tie to kind of the intrinsic motivation and the genuine enthusiasm that she has for her work, I think often comes through in the form of what I see being in the audience or being in a room with her as confidence, as resilience. And it's really, to me, how she constantly turns challenges into feeling more like opportunities. And the other part where she talked about how she's afforded confidence within Rockefeller Capital Management through kind of trial and error and a lot of action and iteration. None of us are going to get it right 100% of the time. We're not trying to be perfect. And as we're building and evolving our business into an extraordinary experience for our clients and multi-generational families, I loved how her confidence comes from a culture that really embraces experimentation and truly stems from a growth mindset.
I know we're going to jump into our next quote, but I love what you said, challenges as opportunities.
Yeah, she totally
and trial
does that,
and
right?
error. It really changes the perspective.
It does. It does. So our next quote is from Kristen's conversation with Terry Ucci, private advisor and managing director of Ucci Wealth Partners.
Make sure you're around when the bond comes due. You're going to be in this business for a long, long time. And it's not about what you do today. It's about where you're going tomorrow.
Kristen, tell us what struck you most from your conversation with Terry. And how do you think the long-term perspective influences the way leaders like Terry make decisions today?
There are so many different ways that I could interpret the words that she said in that single kind of phrase or quote. And I've had to go back and reflect on it a couple of times. When I first heard it, what I really heard her say was you have to have a vision for where you're headed, and every small action leads you in a direction. So all of these tiny steps or all these pennies you're putting in a jar are going to eventually fill up and be a full jar, and that's your long-term vision. And I think that's one way that I heard it when we were having that conversation that day. But then when I go back and really listen to the discussion again, I also heard her say, think forward, have a vision, but don't disrupt and don't lose the little things that make you and your life and your family special along the way. And what I was reminded of in that phrase she said was the story where she said that her director at the time called her into his office and she canceled her honeymoon to make that meeting. She was so worried about what that meeting could possibly be about. And the first thing that he said was, why aren't you on your honeymoon? And maybe it's a reflection for all of us that, yes, we need to have a long-term vision. Yes, every little thing we're doing every single day is leading us towards that vision, but that vision is also a journey. And that journey is only complete if we're looking at it holistically in everything that we do. The other thing I really appreciated about what she said is, when you're happiest in your role or when you're most content, it might be a time to make a change. And I think that's really being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was another theme that I gained from our conversation that day. But I do want to move to our next quote from Ashley McCarthy, and it's extremely motivating. So let's listen.
You may not get to everything that you want to in a particular day, but over the long haul, if you sort of stick with it and do your best every day, you're probably going to end up with a career that you can be really proud of.
So Laura, during your conversation with Ashley that day, what resonated most with you? How did she influence your perspective on your own career and the advice you give to those maybe just starting their journey?
I can't help but smile when I hear all of these women come on and hear their voices booming in the room with us. I'll start off by saying just Ashley to me, and just getting to know her through that discussion, she is such a force. And what truly resonated with me in that discussion, she's incredibly intentional. The way she goes about, and you could just tell from that quote, how she builds habits, or really just the commitment to the day-to-day grind that align with her long-term goals. The one thing that kept jumping out at me, I don't know, Krista, if you've ever read this book, it reminded me of the book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. Knowing you, I'm sure you have read it.
I just read it this year.
It's so good. And it's this idea that success isn't about massive leaps, right? It's about the small, almost mundane, consistent steps that compound over time. And I liken it, because I subscribe to this from an investing perspective, as the beauty, some people call it the 8th greatest wonder of the world, is compound interest. And I often think about this concept of atomic habits in the same way. And to me, that's what Ashley was really getting at. It's not overnight success. It's what do we do? How does each of us show up in the banal, day-to-day, every single day, with discipline, with consistency, when we don't feel like doing it, but you do it, and over time is when you have the explosive outcome. And Ashley, to me, just embodies that. And it really kind of influenced how I think about my own career. Am I creating these daily habits in the form of leadership that I want to exhibit day in and day out? And so I am now emphasizing building these habits that really do shape identity, because who you become matters more than any one single achievement. And all of that was kind of wrapped up in my conversation with Ashley.
Beautiful. It's all about the journey.
It is all about the journey. Exactly. So, Kristen, on our 5th episode, you sat with Sabina Lean, private advisor and managing director out of Winter Park, Florida.
I rarely stop moving forward. I'm a planner and organizer. I don't look back. That's where the serenity prayer comes in. Accept the things that you cannot change, Have the courage to change the things that you can change and know the difference.
Kristen, I was so inspired by Sabina's story. I think I emailed her immediately after I listened to the episode. I'm so intrigued. In fact, it left me wanting to know more about her and about her philosophy and her processes and approaches. So Tell us, what insights from her story inspired you, and how did she demonstrate resilience when things didn't go as planned?
There is so much beauty and confidence and inspiration in Sabina. And it's been such a pleasure having her at Rockefeller Capital Management and in the Southeast Division. Her story resonated with me on so many levels, and I shared her story in this podcast with so many people that I knew would gain something from her words. And some of the things she said that day sit with me every single day, no matter what I'm doing. And one of them, she really changed my perspective. And she said, I think I asked her, what are your goals, or what are big goals that you've accomplished? And she looked perplexed. And I know on the podcast, nobody can see her face, but she looked so perplexed. And she just said, I don't really think about just like finishing a goal. I'm always moving forward. And I thought, again, we were just talking about the journey. Like, it's all a journey. And she really spoke to that. The other thing she talked about is the culture shock. She left Germany when she was 21 years old and the challenges associated with that. And some of the things that I remember is she talked about embracing adventure. She talked about optimism and how she felt so much optimism in the United States when she came over here, and that she was really reaching for the American dream. And to reach for the American dream, coming from where she came from, was all about hard work. It was just doing the hard thing over and over, which you just mentioned. I mean, all of these stories have similar themes, but she was curious. She's a self-starter. She worked really hard. She got scholarships along the way. And one lasting impression that she made on me was this concept of imposter syndrome. And I think so many of us deal with that at some point in our careers, in our lives. And what she said is she was young, and when she was working so hard and so curious, she didn't really have imposter syndrome at the beginning. She was young and curious and excited and working hard. And so I think she found some early success in those days before, any of us start to question ourselves. And that always resonated with me, is how we take that adventure and that curiosity and hard work and turn it into what becomes this great journey, lasting career, family, life. But the most impactful thing she said to me that day was she just never stops moving forward. And I thought that was a beautiful statement.
Yeah, I agree. I have tried to apply some of those things that I heard her talking about. It's not easy, though. I have a tendency to ruminate on things and to reflect too long. And I am trying to channel Sabina. It sounds like you are too, day in and day out, because you just have to move forward. Tomorrow is a new day. Just maintain the optimism, maintain the focus, the dedication, the hard work. And you can't change the past. You can only move in one direction.
Relentless progress forward.
Yes.
Like that is my theme for 2026.
Yes.
Relentless progress forward.
Yeah.
So all we can do is move
Relentless
forward.
progress forward. Okay. As we look back on 2025, I'm reflecting on the invaluable lessons learned throughout the year, especially from the incredible women featured on Genius Loves Company. Their stories and insights have been profoundly impactful. This season, let's reflect on the ways we've invested in ourselves and our own careers through time, relationships, and skill building. So, Kristen, tell our audience, what did you invest in this year that's paid the biggest dividends?
I know what you're thinking, but I'm actually going to save it. I'm going to save it.
Okay, all right. It's a good one,
I'm going to save it for the end.
Okay.
But I did a lot of investing in myself, in my career, in my family this year. And a couple words came to mind. And part of it was going back and listening to these stories and connecting with people like you and the other great inspirational women that we interviewed and spoke with throughout the year. But I spent a lot more time reflecting this year, really just taking a minute and having some white space and allowing myself a moment to not only be in the journey, but to appreciate and enjoy the journey. I spent a lot of time this year really wrapping my arms around kind of my community, my tribe, really making sure that I recognized those that had a meaningful impact in my day in the life and just, shared gratitude for that time and that space and that commitment that they have given to me. Something that I also did was made sure I had meaningful connectivity with may have been a smaller group, but I didn't spread myself as thin this year. And I heard a lot of the themes we heard in Genius Loves Company was the importance of meaningful connectivity.
Yep.
So those are just the first 3 words as I was thinking about this today that came to mind. And I'd be interested, to ask you the same thing. How would you reflect? How have you invested in yourself, your career? What has paid the biggest dividends?
I'm hearing a lot of similarity thematically between our answers. It's funny because it's going to sound like a bit of a contradiction what I'm about to say. I actually said yes and no more this year. So let me unpack it. Where I said no more was establishing, and I wasn't perfect at this, I said no to establishing more boundaries for my time. I did it both from a professional and from a personal perspective. People look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, she is bountiful, plentiful energy, and she's always on. Well, that's exhausting to me. So when I get to the end of a day or the end of a week, I was directing all of this energy to my professional life, and I'd have less energy on the weekends. I even saw it creeping into my professional life too. Gosh, why by Wednesday am I just utterly exhausted? Well, it's because my day is backed up, back to back to back to back to back, literally to back meetings. And I show up being true to myself with a lot of enthusiasm, and I take great pride in what I do. I need an hour of my own time so that I could go walk around the block, get a breath of fresh air. I'm going to say no to dinner, whether it was with friends or from a professional perspective on a Monday night, just knowing that I'd serve myself and ultimately my family and my professional life better if I got home at a reasonable hour, went to the gym, went to bed early, got up the next day. So saying no and establishing more boundaries. Where I was saying yes more this year, again, not as much as I would have liked, and I actually see a whole host of opportunities in 2026, but I said yes to more things also personally and professionally that would have historically made me incredibly uncomfortable. So positions where I did a roadshow, for example, as a stand-in for a topic this year at work that I am not a subject matter expert in. And initially I said, no way, I'm not doing it. So, and in typical fashion, like all of us who are type A, of course I could do it. Of course I did it. I did the work. I showed up 7 times in front of 150 people, talked about a subject that I historically would have been less comfortable talking about for an hour. And I realized after all the work I had put in and I kind of had my talk track established, I thought there's content for me to share that people will gain insights from. And it was the best feeling. Every time I walked off the stage, I was like, I can't believe I almost said no to this. So that's just one quick example. So this year has been a year of saying yes and saying no, I hope in the right places.
Every time I think about you, I think of like this big bubble of energy and enthusiasm, and you do have that. But I would agree with you, it is exhausting. And I feel it more and more because we invest more and more in every single thing that we do. It sounded like the things you were saying no to are really giving you that white space.
They are. A small shift, but a noticeable shift.
And congratulations, you are getting more comfortable being uncomfortable,
yes.
Which we already talked about.
I do think part of that is age. If there's anything good, I think there's actually a lot of good things about getting older. But that, I do think it does go hand in glove. Getting older, you just care less about what other people think of you.
If we had a glass of wine, I would say cheers right now. So let's take it one step further, Laura, what's one investment you made this year that had a significant impact? And how can women leaders set strategic goals for the new year while still achieving career milestones and maintaining personal, I say balance lightly because is it really balanced?
Yeah, but
you know what I mean.
Absolutely. So one of the best investments I made this year in myself, and truthfully, I probably should have led with this answer because I think the work that came from the investment I made in myself is what helped me to be able to know where I should say yes and where I should be saying no more to. I invested personally in an executive coach. I sought this woman out after talking to a number of friends, both men and women in the business, and interviewed a whole host of potential coaches. And I found one. We started working together actually just at the beginning of this year. So in January, it was one of those things. Even with my coach, I had to say no initially because I ended up having personal situation come up. My mother, who's perfectly healthy and fine now, at the beginning of the year, had a really bad fall that was requiring my siblings and I to just kind of be round the clock for the first 6 weeks of this new year in Connecticut. And I had to say to the coach, like, not now, maybe later. I felt like I had taken this big step. I had invested in this process of identifying a coach. And then all of a sudden I was sort of letting myself down. So starting in probably April in earnest, I started working with her on a weekly basis. I ended up doing like a mini boot camp with her over a weekend, just one-on-one. And I still continue to work with her on a weekly basis. It allowed me to answer your prior question about things that have paid dividends this year. They were such simple things. Part of it was realizing that there are certain beliefs and narratives that I've told myself for years that I just had to shift the belief, the belief is not a fact. Shift the mindset, shift the narrative that I've been telling myself. These really subtle tweaks that have been profoundly impactful on me. And I think have given me the strength and the confidence to say yes to certain things I would have said no to previously and emphatically say no to other things and protect my peace.
Your atomic habits.
My atomic habits.
Yeah, these
that's
little
exactly
tweaks.
Right.
That's what
exactly
it's all about.
Right.
So common themes and everything that we're saying. This one was easy for me. And I know this is what you were alluding to earlier. And it really is that important to me this year. I did go into 2025 with a really big goal. And I thought about this goal every single day of this year and even before. And I wanted, as a triathlete, I wanted to do the big race. I wanted to do a full Ironman, which is, for those of you who may not know, is over a 2-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike, followed by a full marathon. And it seemed really overwhelming. But my why, the reason I wanted to do it, I wanted to show my 3 kids, 20, 17, and 12, what doing hard things looked like. I think we tell them all the time. And, my husband and I have been really blessed in that our kids have been raised in a space where it hasn't always had to be hard. And I wanted them to see what doing hard things looked like. And along the way, the gift I got back is each one of my kids started to do the hard things with me. So my daughter started doing long runs with me. My oldest daughter started swimming with me. They got fit on bikes and started doing bikes with me. They would come out and bring me water and fuel, and they really became a part of the journey. And so this past year for me has been about being grateful for and celebrating the community around me because I didn't do it alone. I had a huge community around me. It was about this discipline and commitment. And like you said earlier, I was doing things I didn't want to do. At times I didn't want to do them because if I was going to do the hard things, I had to actually show up. And you talked about showing up earlier. It took sacrifice. It took training for an Ironman, took everything. And so that was what I focused on this year. Along the way, career, travel, family, and I really appreciated the journey. Crossing the finish line had less of an impact on me than the entire training and the entire journey. And when I finished, there are always different challenges that you don't expect. That's part of any Ironman or any race, whether it's weather, how you feel.
You act like the majority of us have done this.
But any race, anything hard that we do, it's never exactly as you expect. And neither was this race for me. And when I finished, somebody said to me, I really enjoyed watching your relentless progress forward. And that's when I decided that 2026, relentless progress forward, because it wasn't about doing it perfectly. It wasn't about doing it as fast as I thought I trained for. It wasn't even actually about the finish line. It was about the journey and proving to myself that I could set my limits even higher. And people always say, like, what now, or how does it feel? And I can tell you, I will never be the same. I will never be the same after that experience.
Wow.
But 2026, relentless progress forward in whatever that is in my life. And I think I showed my kids how to do hard things.
You think? What an audacious goal. And I know it was about the journey, but crossing that finish line must have been nothing short of spectacular.
I mean, it wasn't the worst thing ever.
No. Oh my gosh.
I do wake up every morning and you have that moment where like nothing is happening in the world, and then you remember all of a sudden that like you did it and I did it, and I
say right as if I've ever done something like this, and I haven't.
Look, we all have an Ironman in every single day and every single year. It's just what that is to each person. So we'll see what next year's is.
Oh my gosh. Well, Kristen, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is such an extraordinary accomplishment, one that the lion's share of us will never even scratch the surface of even a component of an Ironman. Speaking for myself here.
Not to be cheesy, but the motto is anything is possible. So I will leave you with anything is possible, Laura. Anything is possible.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy. So this really makes me think about the things that we often overlook when we're measuring success. So how about this for a final question? Kristen, what's one thing that's hard to measure but critical for success as we head into 2026?
I could, off the top of my head, say 4 or 5 things, because so much of what we do and so much about success has nothing to do with what can be measured, although a lot has to do with what can be measured. But I'm going to go back to meaningful connectivity, that being authentic, connecting, it motivates and inspires people to keep reaching for their potential and doing more. And you said you're working with a coach. I worked with a coach during my Ironman. And sometimes that meaningful connectivity and wanting to be more for myself and for somebody else is what got me to the next place. And I think that meaningful connectivity, albeit hard to measure, is critical for success, whether it's mentors, coaches, sponsors, role models. And this all ties back to really where I feel like a lot of these conversations started. But I'm going to flip that around. You know I am. So I want to hear how you would respond to that.
Yes, I've already said it, but something, and I think I heard so much of this in Sabina's conversation as well as others, but it really kind of resonated with me listening to her. So for me, it is about kind of protecting my peace. And when I say that, it means just being focused on the forward path and controlling what I can control. I even think I've referenced this in maybe one of the very first episodes that you and I did with Greg Fleming now, going back almost 2 years ago. It's you can control your own actions, your own reactions, and your attitude. And everybody else, I can't be worried about. And so protecting my own peace and just knowing that I can only control what is in my control, for me, is something I'm going to try to carry forward day in, day out. And just knowing myself, I think, will contribute to just my continued satisfaction from both a work professional as well as from a personal perspective.
So it sounds like we just set 2 big New Year's resolutions,
Yes.
or maybe the New Year's journey, right? Because a resolution sounds like a goal, but relentless progress forward and protecting our peace. That sounds like a great plan.
I love it.
Well, I really appreciate being here with you. I've been looking forward to this. And before we go, I just want to wish everybody a happy holiday season and a very happy new year.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristen. It's such a pleasure to co-host this with you and bring these stories of these remarkable women and leaders from the Rockefeller capital management ecosystem to amplify those stories. It's such a special privilege that we have to be able to do this. Thank you so much to our audience and our faithful listeners. And we wish everyone a happy holiday season and a very productive and peaceful new year.
Thank you for listening to Genius Loves Company. To learn more about Rockefeller Capital Management, visit rockco.com or keep up with us on LinkedIn or Instagram. This material was prepared by Rockefeller Capital Management. The views expressed of the hosts and guests in this episode are as of a particular point in time and are subject to change without notice. The views expressed by the speakers are solely their own and may differ from or conflict with those of other divisions in Rockefeller Capital Management. This information was provided for illustrative and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as an investment recommendation, investment advice, an offer of Rockefeller investment advisory or brokerage services, or a projection or illustration of the performance of any particular investment or strategy offered by Rockefeller. Forward-looking statements, including those presented herein, are inherently uncertain, as future events may differ materially from those reflected, and past performance is not a guarantee of future performance.